Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Unwrap the Value of Ideate Style Manager. My name is Richard Taylor with Ideate Software, and thanks for joining me today for this short 30-minute webinar on the value of Ideate Style Manager. So Ideate Software is all about simplifying your Revit data challenges. Today we're going to be focusing on Ideate Style Manager, but I wanted to mention that we also have 4 other solutions for Revit, and you can see those below there: Ideate BIM Link, Ideate Explorer, Ideate Sticky, and Ideate Apps. So if you have any questions, or if you're interested in any of our other 4 Ideate software solutions, please visit our website where we have lots of videos and lots of information on those solutions as well. And you probably saw this scrolling by, but my name again is Richard Taylor with Ideate Software. I have a background in architecture. I was fortunate enough to be one of the original employees at Revit Technology back quite a few years ago now. And then I worked at Autodesk for about 14 years, and I've worked at Ideate Software for about 5 years. So after the presentation, if you have any questions that come to mind, please don't hesitate to email me at richard.taylor@ideatesoftware.com. You can always follow me on Twitter, and I'd be happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn. So welcome again to this presentation of Unwrap the Value of Ideate Style Manager. Style Manager is our newest solution offering from Ideate Software, and we're really excited about it. So why did we develop this solution? Well, really, the idea that what happens is you may start out with a very standard sort of template of elements and even object styles and fill patterns, line styles, and so forth. But as you start working in a project and you're loading in content from maybe third-party people, or maybe other projects that you're linking information into, or maybe you're copying information from one project to another, all of a sudden you start getting a lot of non-standard styles. Because what happens is, like, when you load a family from a third-party content or developer, what that family might have a series of object styles that are defined, right? So maybe it's not only a piece of a desk as a furniture, but it's got a number of subcategories. So those come along with the family, and they may or may not match your standards. So again, over time, you end up getting all of these object styles and line styles and fill patterns and line styles and filters and things that may or may not be used in the project. And it's really difficult to understand where they're used, if they're used, and if you can safely delete them or maybe merge them into your particular standards. So that's why we developed Ideate Style Manager, to really allow you to be consistent with your project standards and be able to understand the implications of if you are doing a delete, or if you're going to be doing a merge, or let's say you're moving one style to another, what are the ramifications of that? So that's really what we're going to be exploring today. So again, it's this liability. You can delete certain things, but you have no idea what may be impacted. So let's take a look at that just real quickly. And today I'm using Revit 2020, the latest release. However, I want to comment that all of our solutions are available on Revit 2017 through 2020. So for instance, this is just a sample Revit file here. I'm going to go to my Manage tab, and I'm going to bring up the object styles, right? So if I come up the object styles, here are some of my standard object styles. But if I go to casework, there are a lot of, you see here, subcategories that have been created in casework. And just to kind of iterate the fact, or I should just highlight the fact, the casework, the main category has been set to a projection of 1, a cut of 3, and I made it this green color. So as an example, if I come over here to this subcategory BC-plan, I can delete it, right? But I have no idea where that's being used in the project. So as an example, if I just delete that BC-plan, it asks me, hey, are you sure you want to do that? And I say, yes, I do. But then I don't know what happened. Basically, anything that was on that BC-plan automatically got reset to the top level category. So in this case, that would be the projection of 1, the cut of 3 with a color of green. And that may or may not be what I wanted, right? So that's where Ideate Style Manager allows me to understand sort of forensically what's going on. So let's switch back over here. So today what we're going to talk about is assessing the risk of let's say a style deletion. In this case, I'm going to use the example of a line style deletion and show you how we can do that with the Analyze function within Ideate Style Manager. Then we're going to be able to fix and standardize using an example of Revit materials using the merge function. And then I'm going to show you how you can isolate duplicate styles. And then finally, how you can delete unused object styles, in this particular case, highlighting CAD imports, because that's a particular sort of problem that a lot of us face is when we import DWG or MicroStation DGN information, we end up getting a lot of styles that we may or may not want. So the first thing I'm going to do is kind of do a quick spin here on Ideate Style Manager. So when you first come up or bring up Ideate Style Manager, this dialog appears, and right up front it allows you to access information from our online as well as our in-product Getting Started guide. And all of our solutions have these in-product quick start guides. So it's a way for you to access the information about the product very easily. And then you'll see along the top, we actually have 9 different sort of sub-tools within Ideate Style Manager. And so today I'm going to be talking about most of these. So, we're going to talk about object styles and line patterns, fill patterns, materials, material appearance, assets, filters, view templates, and scope boxes. But today, like I said, this quick overview, I'm going to talk about fill patterns. So when I click on fill patterns, the dialog on the left is giving me sort of control or looking at information. The dialog on the right is showing me sort of the results, right, of what I'm looking for. So if I type in the word here, sand, what it's going to do is filter the fill pattern styles based on elements that match that sand. So in this case, even if sand is in the middle of the information, you'll see that it's coming up, or I've got sand dense and sand drafting. And I've used this, it's a German file, and it's a good example because it is a German file in the sense of like now I'm getting a lot of standards that don't match my particular standards. So I want to be able to review this information. So what I can do is click on it and I can basically analyze a particular style, right? So it's saying, well, where is this being used? In this case on the right, then it's telling me it's being used in a material. And I can actually edit that material, or I can go over here and I can, basically, again, edit or show where that's being used. So it's giving me, like I said, the forensics as exactly these elements where they're being used, these fill patterns, right? And so what I can also do, not only can I select Analyze, but I can double click. And so that's what I did there is I double clicked and it analyzed that sand drafting. And it found that not only is it in materials, but it's also in a family. And I can edit that family, and you're going to see some examples of that in a moment where I'm going to be able to go and edit and change the family there for that information. But so right now I want to rename that first one, right? Just to show you that you can go over here and rename. I'm going to take the second half of the name off. So now it doesn't match sand. So I only have sand and sand drafting. Now that doesn't mean that that went away. It just means that now it's no longer part of my filter. So I'm looking at these two and I say, you know what, it'd be great if I could be able to understand exactly what these drafting patterns are. Well, that's one of the great beauties of Ideate Style Manager is you can use any Revit command. So I'm going to go to my fill patterns here. And so while Ideate Style Manager is still open, I can work with any Revit command, just like I can do with some of our other Ideate software solutions like Ideate Explorer. So if I look at this, I see I've got sand dense, and I can decide which one is the one that I would like to keep. Or in this case, let's say I'm going to be merging these. So I like that sand dense. That's a better drafting pattern for me. So, I see that it's being used in 6 different locations. I want to basically now merge those together. And again, my search still says sand, so that's why it's coming up with just the selections that's telling me what is sand. So we're going to see more examples of this, but Ideate Style Manager will always tell me and give me a nice little report of what it did. It changed families, it changed materials, and it updated it with all of this information, right? So now instead of 6, I've got 7 in this particular element, basically, or this fill pattern style, right? And so, again, I can review that information. I can see those that are not analyzed. That's one of the little check marks, is to analyze or not analyze them, right? So I can say, well, if I haven't analyzed them yet, maybe I want to highlight on some and be able to analyze. And I can do a shift select and actually, select multiple ones, or I can just do a double click. Even if it hasn't been analyzed, I can still rename it. You saw there, but I have to first analyze in order to merge or delete. So in this particular case, I'm just showing you like a quick shift select. It's showing me those elements that have that are in use and not in use. Now I can untick used, and so I can say, all right, just show me the ones that aren't used, and then do a shift select and delete all of them. Because again, the ramifications or the implications, I know that they're not used. They don't match my standards, and so I can easily get rid of them. Another check mark is this isolate duplicates, and you might have seen these colors. The colors allows me to understand that these elements, these fill patterns, are the same definition. So if I look at, as an example, that Gypsputs drafting, which came from my German project, and my sand dense, which I just merged, right? So it started out with 6, and then we made it 7. So when I double click to analyze that, that's the 7. Those two definitions are exactly the same. So I can do two things. I can say, well, you know what, maybe I want to merge that Gypsputs over to sand, or I might want to, merge it to something else, or, do some particular action on that. But it's giving me the nice way when I say isolate duplicates, it allows me to understand exactly those things that are sort of defined. So as I was saying, what I was trying to show here with this quick spin on Ideate Style Manager is that the left part of the dialog allows you to sort of choose and select styles. And those check marks allows you to look at, as you see there, built-in styles, or maybe styles that have been created through subcategories, or that are customizable. You can see unused or used. You can see whether something has been analyzed yet or not analyzed, and you can also isolate duplicates in certain situations. Not all of the 9 selections up above allow isolate duplicates. All right. So, and again, over to the right part of the dialog, that's telling me information about, let's say the style, what it is. As you see, I've highlighted on that Gypsputs, but also where it's being used. So again, the risk assessment here is, how do I analyze something, again, where it's being used, right? So in this particular case, I'm going to switch over to line styles, and I'll use that as an example. And you also see that with line styles, we have the isolate duplicates, and we have the built-in or the unused categories. So in this case, again, here's a German project. I've got some line styles that I'm not very familiar with, and it shows me not only the elements, right, or the let's say the families, but it shows me view templates. It shows me information. So if I go over here to this detailed fill region, I can select show. It's going to open up the view, and then as I said, I can use any particular Revit command, and I can though go ahead and edit the boundary. When I edit the boundary, you can see that there is that line style that was ausgezogen, whatever that means in German, but it allowed me to highlight where that was used. If it's used like in a view template, or maybe like in a view, meaning that you've overridden a particular element or category, that's also going to show. So if, which is really nice, the sense of, let's say you went to a view and you said override in view this particular element with this line style, and that's the only place that that line style is used. Well, Ideate Style Manager is going to be able to highlight and tell you where that's being used. So again, this whole analyze and risk assessment, and it's not just, like I mentioned, one type of element usage, but all of the usages throughout the project. Okay, so how do we fix and standardize? Well, I already showed you in that quick overview of how we would merge, but let's look at this when it comes to materials. And again, just looking at different examples here, we have the material browser that I've opened up in Revit. And so I'm just going to go over here and delete this cast in place, concrete, right? And so Revit allows me to do it. And you'll see over to the left, I'm highlighting that it's removed in that wall section, but it's probably removed in other locations. I just happen to have that open, so I was able to see it. But now if I type on, the material here, concrete, and I want to look at what I have, my cast in place or my cast in place situ, I can organize based on usage. So at the very top, there's the top column headers. If I click on that, it's going to organize it from top to bottom, or numeric, the most to the least. Same way with alphabetical, the name, it would be either alphabetical or reverse alphabetical. And so it's telling me exactly all the elements where this is used, all the different families. And I can actually drill down into the wall structure where that cast in place situ is being used in that location for that material. So I have a really good understanding of all of these materials. So in this case, both cast in place concrete and cast in situ are basically the same thing, right? They're just different definitions of, and so what I may want to do is merge those two together. So I'm going to select on the one, which is the cast in place concrete, and I'm going to basically say I want to merge that with the cast in place situ. And so it goes through and it basically looks at all of this information, and it says, all right, the report is I'm changing all of these families, I'm changing all of these elements, and then I'm updating the project. And so now I have that cast in place situ that has now more of the elements. Or I'd say no more of the, there was 13 and 14, so 27. Now, one thing I want to make highlight here is that when we are actually opening up the families in the background to make this change, and those families are opened up in the background and they're loaded into the project. And if you save, the families are saved in the project. However, there are RFA files that that are existing outside of the project. For instance, that let's say that same family that had the material of the cast in place concrete was somewhere out on the disk or on our shared drive. If I were to reload that in to Revit, well, I would get all of those materials again, right? So I'd kind of infiltrate my project again. So the idea here is we're changing that within the project. Then what you might want to do for best practices is to save off those families that are now part of your project, save those as your standards if you're going to be using them again, and save those as new RFA files. So again, just to be clear, what we're doing is we're changing the families within the project and we're saving the project, but we're not changing the external families, the RFA families as they reside out on disk. Okay, so now another example of using Ideate Style Manager is removing information. So if you're familiar with our Ideate Explorer solution, we've had for quite a few years the ability to go find CAD files that are maybe even hidden in a particular view and be able to delete those CAD files. So you understand exactly how many you're using and where they are, and you can get rid of them. But then we always get the question like, well, gee, I removed the CAD files using Ideate Explorer, but now I have all these imported object styles because maybe I did a partial explode, or I still have information that's sort of hanging around that I thought that I would get rid of by removing the DWG. If I go back over here to Revit, and let me come up here and bring up my view visibility. If I come over to my imported categories, this is all the information that shows basically for like I said, imported both families and categories. And you see here I have a lot of DWG information. If I come down here, you can see that as an example, this track2.dwg has all of these subcategories, right? And then there's also the families that may have come in. This is the default. Imports and families is a sort of Revit standard or a built-in category. And then all of these underneath are basically brought in by all kinds of, you see I can scroll down here, there's a ton of stuff that I may or may not want to get in, like all these. I'm going to show you this BMCD2, how to get rid of all those things if you so desire. But first we need to understand if they're being used, right? So let's take a look at that. So again, this is just reiterating the fact that we've got, model objects, annotation objects, and then imported objects in this particular example or this project. So if I come over here to Ideate Style Manager, I want to look at object styles, and for specifically object styles, there's a couple different check marks. There's one that allows me to look at just the object styles that are sort of native, or I should say that are just object styles, or those that are just imported styles. So if I untick object styles, I'm getting just the list of imported styles down below. So now I know that I'm dealing just with the ones that are coming from, let's say in this case, AutoCAD. Now notice that if I double click on the actual bold, which was that DWG, that's the parent. So if I look at this and I say, oh, if there are no subcategories being used within the parent, or the parent is not being used at all, you can actually delete all the subcategories. But in this case, there are 3 instances of this toilet layout 2D.dwg. So there's 3 imported instances. And I can open up the view where those imported instances are. And then I can decide that, okay, do I want to remove that? Would I like to change that to some different category, which I'm going to do in a moment here. But it really allows me to sort of forensically understand how these things are being used, right? So, in this case, I'll just say like, all right, these imported instances, I'll just, for the time being, like I said, leave them right there, but I know that they are in use and I can go ahead and remove them later on. Now, that's the actual DWG itself, but there's also families that may have information brought in. For instance, within the title block, there may be an AutoCAD family or AutoCAD information. Maybe within a particular nested family also. So in this case, when I look at this and I say, oh, here are my imports within families, I can review that and I can say, oh, okay, well, there's that BMCD2-12Z or ZRSTO2, right? And where is it being used, right? So in this case, it's being used in this desk, which you may say, okay, that's great. Well, here's where you can click on Edit Family, and you can go right there, and you can see, well, it's not actually being used in this desk family. There's another furniture family that's been loaded into it as a nested family, and that is where, when I click on that furniture BMCD2, and I look at the properties palette, I can see that there's a subcategory there of the import symbol. So there's the subcategory I'm highlighting in the properties palette, but it actually is a nested family. So it is and this chair has been imported into the desk family, and then the desk is itself a family. So the great thing about Ideate Style Manager is it's telling you not only the family that's being used, in this particular case, this imports, but the nested family condition as well. And then you can decide, how you want to deal with that. If you want to go ahead and merge or change that information, like in this particular case, I want to merge that. I don't want to have that BMCD2. I want to take it and put it on the top level category, which is the imports and families. That is the Revit default. So I'll click on that and I'll go ahead and say merge. And then that, you'll see I'll get the report, and it will then specify where it changed that information, right? So it says the object style was removed and is using now this new imports and families. So again, the great thing is that it's enabling you to understand all this information, make changes, but it's giving you a great report. And like in this case, you see that all those are 0, so I can just delete. They're not being used, and I can purge those basically from my project and get rid of those, so I have a much cleaner project. So really, it all comes down to, don't just hope for the best. You saw when I first started the presentation here, I deleted that subcategory, object style, and I had no idea what was going to happen. And I basically could say, well, I'm just hoping for the best. Hopefully it works out the way I want it to. But now you don't have to rely on that. You can rely on Ideate Style Manager to really forensically understand in this case, all these 9 elements and how they're being used. And I'll just switch over here to Revit. And, again, I tried to highlight a few of the examples, and, in a short period of time, in 30 minutes, I can't go over every one of them, but I just wanted to show you also like filters here. If I highlight and do a shift analyze, you can see like where filters are being used, which particular view they're in, also view templates. This architectural elevation view template is being used in this view, right? And if I say show, then it's going to open up the view where that template is being used. So, the underlying fundamentals of what I showed you for object styles, line patterns, and materials are basically the same operations if you're looking at filters or view templates or scope boxes as well. And I just want to kind of go over quickly what we covered today is basically able to assess the risk of a Revit line style deletion with Analyze. I showed you an example of being able to fix and standardize materials with the merge function. I also showed you that in the overview. Showed you how you can isolate duplicate styles and also using delete in the context of the unused object styles for CAD imports. So there's a question here, is Style Manager available for Revit? That's a perfect segue. Yeah, or for Revit 2017, 18, and 19, the answer is yes. All of our solutions are available on the latest 4 releases of Revit. So we're supporting Revit 2017 through Revit 2020. And as I mentioned, every solution has both in-product getting started guides and help, as well as our online help. And out on our Ideate software website, we have lots of videos, workflow videos and tutorials that will step you through actually how to use these solutions. There's a question from Ruth. There's a good question. Is there a safe way to save off multiple families at once? And yeah, that's where I would actually go over here to the project browser. This is just a Revit command, right? So I would come over here and say under the families, like if I wanted to come over to, in this case, let's say furniture, right? And if I say here, I would specify, let's go here, and that I wanted to save off. And if you look at the top level families, you can actually do this all at once, but I would kind of go through each category itself or each family and type and hit save, and then save that family and type once it's been edited or modified by Ideate Style Manager. So you're just really using the tools within Revit to do that. All right, so again, I know I'm at the top of the hour. I want to thank everyone for their time and attention. I'm here for questions. You can go and download a 14-day trial of Ideate Style Manager. With our trial, we have basically enabled the materials and the material asset functionality to give you a flavor of how that works. So you'll notice that the other, let's see, 7 items are not available. They're grayed out. But we feel that working with materials and material assets will give you a nice flavor of how Ideate Style Manager works. So that's a 14-day trial that you can download from our website. And like I said, you can learn a lot more at ideatesoftware.com. So with that, I want to thank everyone. If there are some, you feel free. I'll be on here for a few more minutes if you want to type some more questions. But I want to thank everyone for your time and attention today. I really appreciate it.